cheer. To climates unknown did courageously steer. Through oceans to deserts for freedom they came, and dying bequeathed us their freedom and fame. In freedom we're born, and in freedom we live. Our purses are ready, steady, friends, steady. Not as slaves, but as free men, our money will give.
And a hush falls over the crowd. That's great. I love it. Welcome, everyone, to the first conversation of the spring semester of the programs of the Historical Society of Old Abington. We're meeting here today on March 1st. I'm saying this because we're on cable too, at the Dyer Memorial Library in Abington. And we do 6 programs a year, 3 in the fall and 3 in the spring. Today's is going to be about fires and firefighting in the Old Town. The first Sunday in April, we're going to have a program. I love the title of this one. I came up with it, The Business of Dying. We'll be talking with local funeral directors from the 3 towns. They're all in historic buildings, and the business has changed quite a bit over the years. So we'll be talking about that. And the first Sunday in May, we will be doing a field trip and going to the GAR Hall in Rockland. It's the only one that's still functioning as a GAR Hall among the 3 that existed in the 3 towns. But before I go any further, we always start our programs the same way, and that's with a salute to the flag. So if you would rise, if you care to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And while you're still standing, I'd just like to observe a quick moment of silence for Jack Buckley, who passed away not long ago. He was very active in both the society and as a trustee of the Dyer Memorial Library. And we shall miss him. If you would like to take a seat now. A few announcements, a few recognitions. We have signed on to a project there's a new group that's not Eagle Scouts, they're above Eagle Scouts, Voyages, Visionaries, I don't know what it's called. Anyway. Ventures, thank you. I knew someone would know if I didn't. And Aaron Christian is doing a program where he'll be doing signs to identify historic structures throughout Abington. He's doing a fundraising spaghetti supper on March 8th from 5 to 7 at the American Legion Post on Washington Street here in Abington. And it's $8 per person, $24 per family, 3 or more. Anyway, but this is kind of the equivalent of an Eagle Scout project, but with a new venturing crew. And it's obviously historic related. They'll be using the historic inventory that was prepared back in the 1970s for the town of Abington, which will certify that whatever they're putting on is qualified. But we'll have more information on that. Aaron couldn't make it today, so that is something that I'm just announcing that's going to happen. I also wanted to acknowledge, we get a lot of donations of interesting things. People usually contact me about it, and I think we need to start displaying them more. I want to share this with you. The Grand Fair being held in Thomas Hall in Hanson. We don't normally cover Hanson, but the male chorus of Whitman, 30 voices, were entertaining there. And I love this, to be one fancy clock, a piece of sheeting, painted table scarf, guest cake, etc., to be disposed of by the Yankee art of guessing. I have no idea what that is, but it sounds I'd like to try that. Anyway, this was a gift from Mr. Barry over here. Would you stand and take a bow, please? He hit me up and said, would you like it? And I said, sure. So that came from an auction, was it? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. And we're always grateful for things that come our way that are of general interest, certainly for the 3 towns. And I hesitated when I saw Hanson, but we saw Whitman. I said, yeah, I'll take it. And I think it will find its way to the wall in the new office we're working on upstairs. So that's exciting that we get new stuff, and we try to acknowledge. I think we need to do a better job of acknowledging it when we get it. So thank you, Nelson. Today's program is in 3 sections. I'm going to first talk about fires in general and different types of construction that helped it or hurt it, and some of the methods to fight fires. And then the middle section is going to be on the great 1890 fire of Rockland. No one around still remembers that, but I learned about it years ago, and I was kind of fascinated by the history. It was really a seminal time in firefighting, fire equipment, fire preparedness, and water systems. So for me, although there's any number of major fires we could talk about, this one covered a lot of bases that I thought was important, so I thought I'd focus some time on that. And then we have two guests with us today. We have Abington Fire Chief John Nuttall and Deputy Chief Ron Howe, and I'm going to invite them up in the final segment to talk about current means and methods and equipment. They are the experts in that. We have some photographs that relate to it that they'll be able to explain to us. So that's how it's laid out. So let's dive in, shall we? If I push the right button. Fire brigades. What do you use to put out a fire? Water. Where did you get it? You got it from cisterns and pumps and wells. And how did you get it to the fire to put it out? A bucket brigade. We have some buckets actually. We have a display going on right now. Thanks to the efforts of the Dyer Memorial Library folks and staff. They pulled together stuff from the collections, and there's some fire buckets out there. But this was the method. How did you put out a fire? You poured water on it. How did you get it? You basically, from person to person to person, from the well source, the water source, to the source of the fire. And we see here a pump in the, in which part? Somewhere here. This is fancy. Over here, they're pumping away, they're passing it through and getting it up to the roof here where the fire was. Okay. This leads me as an architect to want to tell you a little bit about different types of construction. The earliest buildings we were dealing with that could catch fire were very basic in construction, post and beam. Big posts in the corners, big beams running across the floor spans and everything else. And oftentimes, particularly in the earliest of colonials, a center chimney. The center chimney was the main heat source for the house. The fires were kept going all the time, and the heat source in the middle of the house stayed warm and kept the house warm. The fires were exposed, the fires were visible, the fires were tended to. We didn't see a lot of fires back then as a result. These people lived with fire, lived with open flame all the time. They were good at handling it. So, and the type of construction was such. To this day, we have a section of the building code dealing with heavy timber construction, because in many ways it's safer than steel. It takes a long time to burn through a wooden beam. Steel, on the other hand, with enough heat, just warps and melts and is no good structurally anymore. So in some cases, heavy timber is actually considered better than steel. So that was an important understanding about what could burn. This is from a wonderful book on Dietz's book on dwelling house construction from the 1930s and 40s, where he talks about all the different types of constructions, and we're seeing a braced frame using posts and beams, dropped girts and everything, and the walls were just infill between these. This is an important thing to understand when we talk about where construction went from there. As buildings got more complicated, and as construction techniques changed, and as wood manufacturing changed, someone came up with a brilliant idea of using smaller wood, easier to handle, and running it longer lengths. Instead of just going floor to floor, they could run all the way from the bottom to the top with one piece of wood. And it was called balloon construction. Let me see. This is, again, another building. We've seen these all around Abington, Rockland, and Whitman. We call them Victorian. It's actually Queen Anne, but they're typically balloon construction. What is balloon construction? The studs, instead of stopping at the floor, go all the way up to the attic. And what that created was individual flues, like a fireplace flue, hidden in the wall every framing bay. So if you ended up with a fire down here, it very quickly spread all the way up through. This is still a curse of construction and firefighting in these parts. Because not only did we suddenly have wall studs that went all the way up and flues in every single framing bay and every single outside wall that wasn't interrupted by a window. But what did we put in those framing bays? We put plenty. We put gas pipes. Oh my God. You know, we lit houses with gas, which if the fire didn't kill you and you forgot to shut it off, the fumes would kill you. And we put wiring in, you know, things that are out of sight that could contribute to fire in buildings that had flues in every single framing bay. This was deadly, you know, and as I said, to this day, we still deal with this when we hear about old houses with the fire spreading from the basement to the attic or vice versa. I just know it's balloon construction. It's technically in its original form illegal now. You can't do it. But what they do instead, and I confess my Martha's Vineyard house I built this way, it's balloon frame, but at the floor level, it should be at the floor level, we put in fire blocking. We stop that flue, at least at the floor level. This one actually shows it stop mid-wall as well, which is, I think, overkill. But the notion is stop the flue, stop the chance for fire to go up to the second floor. Because firefighting equipment now, the bucket brigade, not only is trying to put out a first floor fire or first floor roof fire, now we're into multi-stories. And how are you going to deal with that? So that was a problem of construction. Today's construction is more like this. It's a box frame complete at each floor, and the studs run just within that floor. So it's automatically blocked off. It's much, much safer. This is how we build today. And it's as fire resistant as wood can be. And it's solved the problem of balloon frame, but it's an ongoing problem, as I say, with any of the older houses that we deal with, any of the older construction that we deal with. How did you move water? Bucket brigade? Fine. Okay. Pumpers, the other thing. But pumping from what? Typically any water source, a cistern. In fact, I was reading about and I'm going to talk about the early water distribution systems in Abington, Rockland, and Whitman. They actually had cisterns, actual buried compartments, if you will, around town that you could plug a pumper into and have a water source to start pumping from to fight a fire. But suddenly with the pumper, you could get a water projection through a hose, which up until then you couldn't. You were dealing with buckets. So how did you get the water up high? You had a pumper. The King Philip was purchased by Rockland early on, and it was basically state-of-the-art. It was first hand-pulled and then changed to be horse-drawn. I read a cute story that the Rockland Fire Department actually never had their own horses, but they got them from the local liveries, and they were so well trained that when the fire bell rang, the horses were let go and they went straight to the fire station. They knew enough, yeah, okay, ready, and hook them up and get them going. So the King Philip saved a lot of lives even after they thought they were done with it, which is a story I'll come up to in the Rockland thing. This was stored for years, I think in a Tedeschi warehouse, as I understand,
yes.
And restored. Pardon me?
Ralph Tedeschi did it over.
Okay, he did it. And this was for a while at the NFPA, National Fire Protection Association headquarters,
right.
On Battery Park in Braintree.
Right.
But it's back, I guess, in Rockland. It's no longer there. So this is still very much with us, and I think it's going to have some refurbishing, restoring again. It was a favorite piece at firefighter rallies and events because it was still functioning, which is pretty amazing when you think about it after all these years. But they spent some real money for a good reason, which I'll also talk about. It was supplanted, but this is from the Historical Society collection, but it's not here. It's in New Jersey, I think, judging by the name from Tabor Leather here. But this is a steam pumper. You can only do so much by hand. You can only get so much power, so much projection. But you get a steam engine behind it doing the pumping, and you increase your pumping capability greatly. But it's heavy, it's big, it's bulky, and the three horses here knew what they were doing. So you had to get that equipment going. When Rockland and Abington were still using pumpers, hand pumpers, Brockton had steam-powered locomotion here, or steam-powered pumping capability. Ron, I see your hand up already.
Just an interesting fact that I had heard. We have this picture hanging in our station.
other than the fact that none of their hooves are touching the ground. Later on, after this picture was taken, those 3 horses were drafted into service for World War I.
Wow.
But unfortunately, while they were on a ship going across the North Atlantic, it was torpedoed.
Ah,
And
they didn't make it.
No.
Went down with the ship. That's too bad. Do you know, was it New Jersey? My research indicated that it probably was, that they weren't local.
We thought that was Brockton.
Really? Okay. Tabor Leather on a search came up in New Jersey, but perhaps it could have been Brockton. But in that case, if this was indeed the Brockton equipment, this may have been used to fight the Great Fire in Rockland. So here are different methods and means, and I love this one. This is Abington, 1921, and it is our 1921 Seagrave, pumping 750 gallons per minute. Now that's Carl Shaw's dog Terry sitting in the seat, and the remark on the back of the photograph was Abington's only permanent firefighter for many years. Thank you, Teddy. I'm a little disappointed as a Dalmatian owner about the breed, but whatever. That was state of the art again by 1921. Good for us for having it.
You know why they had a dog?
Why they had a dog. I know why they had a Dalmatian when things were horse-drawn.
Yeah.
Because Dalmatians were bred to work with horses. They made them run faster. And if you wanted to get that equipment, like the last slide, if you wanted to get those horses and that equipment to the fire faster, you had the Dalmatian working the horses.
Yeah, the dog would always run down by the horse's feet. The horse would never kick that dog and never step on it. But after they were at the scene of the fire, they'd unhitch the horses and move them away from the fire because the horses would get very nervous and jumpy. They would take the dog, and the dog would corral the horses to keep them together so they wouldn't move around.
The Dalmatians are ridiculously brave and not afraid of that.
Right.
I was
they had a
also
lot of different breeds other than Dalmatians. You know?
I was also told by a fireman once that they don't do Dalmatians anymore because of the squish factor. The horses would move for them. The motorized equipment does not. So, Chief.
Like, I believe that engine for a long time was on display at Evil Railroad.
Really?
At the museum there.
In the Evil collection?
Going out.
Is that Old
Because
Mod?
if you look behind the dog, there's a round basket that had the white rubber
Right here?
booster on it, right there. It was,
Yeah.
last time I saw it, which was in the late 1980s, prior to Ediville going down, that rubber hose was devulcanizing. It was like melting,
Yeah.
which would occur with white rubber. I don't know where that engine ended up, but last I knew at one point, you may have all seen it at one point at the old Ediville Railroad Vehicle Museum they used to have in there.
I had an inquiry a few years ago from someone who had an Abington engine. I want to say it was in New Hampshire or something. They were interested in donating it to us, but we really didn't have the place, the funds, or anything else to make it happen. I don't know if it was the Seagrave or not. But
Is that Old Mod?
Old Mod, I don't know. It wasn't labeled as such. Does that ring a bell with anyone?
Old Mod is Rockland.
Old Mod is Rockland.
Rockland,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
So it's not. We have Rockland fire historians here, which are going to keep me on my P's and Q's today. Let me tell you. But anyway, so this is the progression from hand to horse to motive power. And with each one, the firefighting capacity increased beyond belief, which is really exciting. And we're going to get into the new equipment too before we're done. This is the Center Abington station. We had two virtually identical stations, one just right over there, the corner of Bank Street and Dunbar Street. In fact, the building behind, I think, is the water department old garage, which is still there. The firefighters will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the towers were used for drying hoses.
Right.
Otherwise, they would rot, basically. And we're seeing, this appears to be horse-drawn equipment from the Center Abington station. It's from a very small photograph that we've enlarged quite a bit. This was taken down some years ago, but it was the twin, as you see, to the Brighton Street station in North Abington. Abington has had a history for many years of having two stations. And this is the old Standish and Winthrop block over here, where on the street right now, Bemis Drugs over my right shoulder in this picture. That actually looks like the 21 Seagrave to me, but I'm not an expert. But it appears to be, I can't tell if the horse is in the seat or not. I mean, the dog's in the seat or not, but that appears to be the Seagrave, just from a casual observation. And somewhere along here, I think beyond it was the lockup. So we had fire and police right next to each other.
Next to it on the left. Next to it on the left.
Right over here. Yeah, that's what I thought. It's a great picture. There's a few others I know that even show the Baptist church in the backyard. This was eventually demoted to a civil defense building, and working in conjunction with the Baptist church, it was demolished, which I still am not happy about to this day, but that's just me. Whitman had 2 stations. This is Central, which I think they're still using.
Yes.
Built in 1901. This picture's from the 1912 bicentennial history book, which also gave us a picture of Rockland's station. This isn't it. This is Rockland's station at the time, but this is from another picture entirely with the King Philip here in the middle. I don't remember I'm not sure we understand the event for this one, but we had 2 bays in this picture. I think that by 1912 there were 3 bays. This I think was just reconfigured, but everyone's clearly turned out for some event, and I see hoses and I see connections and everything else going there with the King Philip. So that's kind of fun to see as well. Next, I ended with Rockland there intentionally because I do want to talk about the Great Fire of Rockland. Because, I'll just put it very bluntly, it caught us with our pants down. It caught us unprepared when we should have been prepared, when we thought we were prepared, and we weren't prepared. I'm working from a couple of different historical sources. One is the writings of the late Martha Campbell, who was a friend of mine and had a weekly column in the Rockland Standard. And the other is an actual article from July 18th and 1890 from the Rockland Independent. So we have both a voice speaking to us from the scene, from the time, and we have a historian talking to us over the years. So it's an interesting blend between the two. But the focus of all of it started at the Old Brown Church. This is the Congregational Church in Rockland Center. It's the second building on the site. The first was pushed back up Church Street and became, I thought it became a school. I'm reading that it became a factory. Not the Hurley factory. It became a factory, though. But anyway, this Congregational Church stood there, known as the Brown Church for a couple of for one primary reason. It's made of wood. They wanted it to look like it was made of stone, so they coated it in brown paint with sand in it to give it the texture of stone from a visual appearance. And it does look like stone. I think they were pretty successful in doing that. This is a picture from the Historical Society collection from, Silas Gurney's photograph on Reed Street. He was a photographer in town at the time, and this collection of photographs was given to the Historical Society by Chief, I believe it was Clyson Inkley. So we have a series of photographs, actually I have them here, from that collection. Now, this church, and I hadn't read about this one until recently, in 1883, the steeple was struck by lightning and it caught fire. They were able to put it out. But it scared the heck out of everyone because they realized that's a long way up. And hand pumpers ain't going to do this. It's time we jump up and step up and do a municipal water system. Up until then, everyone was on private wells. So Abington, Rockland, and Whitman looked at putting in one municipal water system for the 3 towns. Whitman jumped out of it and opted out of it, but Abington and Rockland continued with it, and indeed did it. They put a standpipe on Beach Hill in Rockland to build up water pressure, and they pumped into it from Big Sandy, I think it was, pond. And miles and miles and miles of pipes between the towns. And there were 2 pumps to keep the pressure up, to keep the standpipe full. All great theories, but in July of 1890, they were in the middle of a drought. Everything was dry, the roofs were dry, the buildings were dry, and painters were working on this building. I've seen the contemporary story varies from the early story, but one way or another, they were using torches to do it. And the contemporary story I find easier to believe that they couldn't gauge the temperature of the wood, the substrate they were dealing with, because of the sand. The sand was a variable. The sand held the heat. and ultimately set the wood beneath it on fire. So we had a major fire in a steeple, and they called out the equipment. The equipment at that point was the King Philip. And no, I'm sorry, the King Philip was retired by then. It was in storage. The cisterns was still there. But they hooked up fire hoses to the hydrants. There was one actually right on the corner. Oops. The standpipe, which was supposed to hold 80 feet of water, I've seen two different accounts. One said it had 40, the other said it had like 26. They had no water pressure. So here they are basically with a garden hose trying to put out a major fire in a drought in a dry building with wind. Didn't go very well. Didn't go very well at all. So they called out for help from all the surrounding towns. Abington came in and did their part and actually saved some buildings. Brockton came over finally with a steamer. It took them, I think, 45 minutes to get here. And something else I read in the contemporary account from it, I'm sorry, the modern account for it, not the old account, was that one of the horses died on the way over. That must have slowed them up quite a bit. So, but they came over. And they were able to take a position to the south of the building, further down on Union Street, and stop the fire from proceeding any further. As they said, it was approaching the damn train station. It was heading in that direction, and they were able to help stop it. The King Philip was brought out of retirement and hooked into the cistern. The nearest one, I think, from what I read, was what I will know as in front of the W.T. Grant building. Some of you are old enough to know where that was, okay? Randall Print, that area, okay, from those who know the hill from way back. But they soon depleted it. There just wasn't enough water. And the problem was that the pumps were totally inadequate to deal with an emergency situation. They could barely handle keeping the standpipe full on a regular basis, but trying to keep it full with an extra demand when it was already low wasn't going to happen, and it didn't happen. We lost a lot, Rockland lost a lot of buildings at that time. And this, I'm told, is the back of the factory building, which would have been the church. I don't see it. I think this is maybe mislabeled, but it was clearly on fire by that point too. It had spread into that one. The devastation was just absolutely amazing when you think that that was the middle of Rockland Center. All because they had put their faith in a new system that was supposed to supply them with adequate water pressure to fight a reasonable fire, and well, it was maybe more than a reasonable fire, but it wasn't up to the task. They pretty quickly went out and did two things, well, three things. They fired the engineers at the water plant, and the commissioners stayed on in their jobs, but the engineers got fired. They ordered new pumps, bigger, more powerful pumps, and they ordered a steam pumper, because they saw what Brockton had been able to do, and they didn't ever want this to happen again. And it really hasn't. They've done quite well with the equipment they have. But they were forced each time to keep up. They probably wouldn't have had the King Philip pumper if it weren't for the steeple fire that happened 7 years before the big fire. But for a long time, if you said the big fire in Rockland, people knew what you were talking about. Not so much anymore. And when you realize what it took out that day, it is just amazing. This again is from, the source here is Martha Campbell. The brown church on the corner. The old white church moved back, is building number 2, which is there. The schoolhouse, number 3. The lockup, the local prison, I guess would have to call the jail. George Wheeler's residence on the corner. 2 factory buildings here at number 6. Number 7, the Underwood Building. Now, the Underwood Building housed the town offices and the school committee offices and the library, and on the 3rd floor, the GAR Hall. That was a pretty major take to lose all of that. It's more than us losing, Abington losing the savings bank block just up on the corner, which of course housed town offices, but it was one building. Look at all the buildings it took out in one fire. So this was the most devastating fire up until that time, and fire people would have to tell me if we've had one as devastating since. We've had some big ones, but they've typically been limited to one building, maybe two buildings, but not taking out the whole middle of a downtown. So I've often thought that this is something really, really significant that we have to look back on. And every time we think we're prepared to deal with something like this, don't be too short. You know, examine your premises, because their pumping was new. I grant you, it was new, but their system was inadequate to handle any emergency situation of this magnitude. So they learned from that, and they took steps. Which, thank you, Rockland, you did. You took steps. Everything moved to temporary headquarters. Eventually, everything got rebuilt. There's a third Congregational Church that still stands on the site of the old Brown Church. And it was designed by, I think, a Chicago architect. The Opera House, I think, and Rockland, which bag? Savings on the corner here. Rockland Trust is across the street. And all of these buildings got rebuilt, and back here as well. So, I mean, things got put back together. But it was devastating. They had so much to deal with, all in one fire. This goes, I had read about this years ago, just simply as the burning of the Brown Church and the circumstances that followed it. I really hadn't grasped as to how extensive it was till I did more reading. So we do have both of those sources available here. If you do want to do more reading, there is, again, the Rockland Independent article, which has been transcribed. So it's fairly easy to read. That's in our files from July 18th of 1890. And the writings of Martha Campbell from the Rockland Standard. There was a few articles in here, the first being Fire Hazard in the First Water System, and talking about early fires, and going on to talk about, the next one was what? The construction of the water system, not surprising. And the last one was the Brown Church fire. So all of those were covered in that. And she then went on to write more about the hill. Okay, where the sandpipe is. I just said it. Beach Hill, thank you. The whole development of Beach Hill is fascinating. It is one of the tallest points in all of Plymouth County, certainly in Abington, so it was the logical choice for that. So we continue on. We do new equipment, we do new fire stations, and most of you probably will recognize this one as Station 1 in Abington, which is a good time to invite forward the fire chief and the deputy chief. If you would join me up here. I have some questions, and I'm sure the audience will have some questions as well, but I thought we might get into it talking about current facilities, current methods, and I have pictures of your two newest vehicles here, but the Abington Fire Department operates out of two facilities. Station 1, which has been hugely impacted by the work on Route 18. I'm sure you'll agree with me on that. And Station 2, which is on Rockland Street, technically. It's right at the fork in the road. So we're still a two-fire station town. And I can certainly point out, and I'm sure they can verify, if you're fighting a fire in West Abington, this is the closest station. We have, over the years, had to, for budgetary reasons, suffer without it, but we currently have both stations operating. You folks are looking at a new station and a central station. In spite of the fact that out of the three towns we have the most modern stations, they're still not serving us well. Can you just briefly talk about the need?
Sure. And again, I'm John Nuttall. I'm your fire chief in Abington. Deputy Ron Howe, the deputy fire chief in Abington. Ron's really in charge of the fire prevention division of the department. I kind of have the budgetary personnel and all the other stuff. So
you have the headaches.
But we work very well together, dividing all those duties. And also, before I begin, we have a couple of our brother firefighters from Rockland in the back. And the entire beginning of this entire presentation, myself and Deputy Howe have been heckling them. So now we're waiting for the fire back. So I'm hoping they're kind to us. Honestly, we work extremely well together. The area departments, and, you just have to change the patch with the fire departments, police as well. And we have fun together, but we work very well together. Rockland, Whitman, the area towns, Brockton certainly. And I'm going to touch on something you said about where Rockland copied some equipment that Brockton had. Abington did the same thing. We get to
Okay.
photograph one of our apparatus later on. To the fire stations specifically, we are conducting a study at the moment on where Abington as a town, as the Abington Fire Department, really needs to be with our fire stations. Yes, we probably have the most modern of stations of the three towns, which is true. However, we also had the two smallest stations of the three towns.
Oh, yeah.
This is Station 2. This was designed and built in 1974, so it was designed in the roughly 1973.
Station 1 was...
Station 1 was
73, wasn't it?
1964.
64. Okay.
64. Both of those stations were great stations, modern at the time. This has a few issues chronically just with heating, ventilation, but the real key on these are they were both designed and built prior to the Abington Fire Department taking on the duties of emergency medicine. They were not designed for ambulances. They were designed for smaller fire apparatus. Apparatus just in itself has grown in size, and I can talk about that when we look at the modern apparatus next. They weren't designed for female firefighters. Abington has female firefighters. We've had a couple. We have some currently, as well as our administrative staff. There are no separate bathroom, restroom facilities. We weren't designed for computers or a lot of the equipment that we have. That was all science fiction back then, to be honest with you. So
It still is.
and we get around that certainly, but it's caught up to us. And Route 18 up at headquarters station, the expansion of Route 18 has really become an issue.
Yeah.
And that's going to continue.
Right.
We're expecting.
It's not going to get any better.
Correct. Yeah. So we're at the point. We're waiting for the feasibility study to come back. We'll see what that says. I think the town at that point, I don't know what's going to happen. I think the town may have some decisions to make one way or the other.
Sure.
Either way, that we're still hampered with these issues that we have. So
Now, in fact, I mean, as we talk about the architecture, the construction and everything, I mean, that has even affected your decisions. Tower 1 had to fit in a low ceiling building. So this is, I mean, they're all custom, but this one has some specific design requirements because of the height of the doors in the building. Am I correct?
the doors, as well as there's a main carrying beam, and it does fit. We got it to fit.
Well, it was designed to fit.
Correct. However, the first time we backed this apparatus into the building, that was painful for me because
Your
we're
face is priceless that day.
inch by inch, we're backing this in.
That much space.
Oh,
Literally
great.
3/4 of an inch.
Did you let air out of the tires or something?
The apparatus has settled slightly, so now it's closer to about 1.5 inches. Just over
good.
time, the springs, the weight of the equipment, this carries 300 gallons of water.
Tire wear.
Tire wear. It does. He's right.
That's a 1/16 of an inch. Come on.
When you're dealing less than an inch,
It matters. It matters.
I love this piece of apparatus, and I still thank the Abington residents for supporting us back in 2014-15 when the old ladder truck had a critical failure of the main frame. That's what really was the impetus for us to replace that truck.
It was gonna die.
Overnight. It just became almost non-operational overnight. When you spoke earlier about the Great Fire in Rockland, and when the Brockton sent their steamer over to assist, and Rockland copied what Brockton did, we did the exact same thing with this truck.
Tower
We
One?
have seen the Brockton Tower truck, the Brockton Tower Company, and it was Ladder 2 at the time, operating the tower, and retired Chief Galligan, who's a legend in the area, retired chief from Brockton Fire, who really knew how to use this apparatus. The unique thing with this apparatus is it has the bucket in the end. Now, what difference, and there's a lot of I don't want to say controversy, a lot of discussion amongst fire departments whether it's best to have this type or just a straight ladder. A straight ladder, which a lot of the area departments have, you can kind of fit into narrow areas, and we understand that. We have that. However, it's literally about as wide as me. When you get to that last section of the ladder, it's about as wide as I am, and I'm certainly not the largest firefighter that we have. So it's cramped space, and you're up there at an angle, and you're chopping a hole in the roof, high, yep. And whether, just to operate whatever task it is you're doing, we can do it. We've all done it, but it's awkward in your back. You're there. There's only so much you can do. When you have a bucket in the end, you have a very wide platform. It's about 4.5 feet wide. You can fit 2 firefighters side by side, operating together on a level platform. We have an air supply up there, so you can be tied into it. We have a short section of fire hose up there, a 5-foot section of an actual fire hose. So one firefighter can be pulling the rake board from a building, and another one is hitting it with a hose right there.
Right, is this happening?
We also have, there is a standpipe up there, which is basically a 2.5-inch fire hydrant on the end of this. If we wanted to, we could actually run fire hoses on a roof. If you have a large factory, we kind of don't like to do that because now you're actually, at that point now that bucket's committed there,
Yeah.
but we can do it. There
Yeah,
are times that is
Moving
required.
it, but also must be good for rescue.
Rescue, absolutely. We can put a wheelchair in this.
Yeah.
Actually, it's designed for that.
Yeah.
A Stokes basket, a bucket. And there's also a gun on the end of this. This is really the unique thing with this truck. And the old ladder truck also had a ladder pipe. We call it, it's a gun. It's about anywhere from 800 to 1,000 gallons per minute if you can supply the water.
Well, considering
and
the
ladder
Seagrave
pipes have
only did
that.
750, so...
This has a 2,000 gallon per
Good
minute pump,
Lord.
but we have to feed it. We have to feed it.
We've kind of come up a little higher, haven't we?
Correct. So the gun on this is 1,000 gallons per minute, assuming we can get that. And the unique thing with this truck, because other ladder trucks also have a gun up there, but usually they're stationary. They kind of angle it up like there. They're spraying the water down. They can move it somewhat. This can move three-dimensionally.
Oh,
This
wow.
is the only complete mobile master stream. Master stream's a big gun on a fire ground and we watched Brockton do this time and again. The old, it's now the parking lot at the First Baptist Church. So it was a very large building,
Bemis block.
the Bemis block, and that burnt about 1998 or 2001. Might have been 2001, I forget. That had a fire in there, and Brockton was able to, they almost put their bucket in the building. They actually went from literally having the bucket in the sidewalk, spraying up into the ceilings, and then spraying straight in horizontally and then down into it.
All the angles.
This truck, you can do it. You can. It's the only mobile master stream on the fire ground. An incredibly versatile piece of apparatus.
And what's the height range?
100 feet.
100 feet.
Only 100 feet. Everybody thinks you get 100 feet. What do you need it that long for? It's only 100 feet.
Yeah,
We've got thousands of feet of fire hose, which we can park away from the building. We've got to get within the building. Now, we don't have many 100-foot tall buildings, but the reach to get to that building
Counts.
We have used this truck in the old ladder truck on some of the smaller homes, even like in the Green Street area, which is, or Campanelli type buildings on a chimney fire or even to vent the roof, because maybe you're going over 2 or 3 feet of snow. It's easy to go straight across the front yard if you can get close enough. It's only 100 feet. And then we get into trigonometry, and I'm not going there, but you got to make sure you park the apparatus in the right location to be able to hit your task. With only 100 feet to do it. 100 feet's a good length. They actually have smaller ones, but this is an incredibly powerful truck.
And
Thank you again for supporting us on this. It was money very well spent.
Incredibly versatile.
Also, I'd like to point out the fact is that a lot of people don't know, years ago, we used to ride the back step.
Yes.
Now we can't ride the back step, and they look at the cab and they say, why do you have such a big cab? Well, everybody's got to be in the way.
Inside.
I don't need to take your thunder away.
You're absolutely correct.
But Hanover, Abington came to that big fire that we were at, so we used the mutual aid along with several other towns, but that was a tricky fire, it could have been, and nobody got hurt.
And when these are operating, and when we say, we've got that mobile gun, when we have enough water on this, and we've done this at fires, numerous fires since we've had this truck, Holbrook, Brockton, Rockland recently, we literally obliterate the building. Now, we're talking about buildings that they're done. These are fires where it's obvious the fire has succeeded. We have to get to it. This thing is so powerful. We've seen Brockton in Boston fires. You're literally obliterating the building with this, which means you're able to get that water stream into areas where you'd have to wait for the fire to burn itself through, otherwise, to gain access to it. This is just, it's destroying the building, which saves injuries, saves time, as long as everybody backs away.
Yeah, years ago, one of my projects was converting the old Braintree High School to apartments and condos for.
I remember when that burned. Yes,
I do too. It was one of my projects going up in flames. But I was chatting with maybe Chief Grandy at the time or something in Braintree, and they're brick walls that were still standing and were suddenly very fragile because what was backing them up wasn't there anymore. The wood was gone, and I looked at him. I said, "Can you just blow out every window?" Because as soon as you blow out the window, the wind can blow through the wall, and the wall isn't offering as much resistance. And the building did not collapse. They did blow out every single window. And, the shell survived, and it got rebuilt. But Had they not had that finesse, shall we say, to be able to do that, to be able to just punch out a window with a stream of water, the building probably would have just gone, but there was still something to save.
A lot of masonry buildings were designed to have the wood portions collapse.
Yeah.
They actually had fire cuts in the main timbers. They'd build the masonry unit first, and they'd have like a corbel shelf along that with the brick coming out, and then they would rest and these are massive timbers,
Oh, yeah.
or even just large joists. They would rest those wooden floor joists either on that corbel shelf, or if it went into a pocket in the masonry, there was actually an undercut on that wooden beam so that when it burned, it would collapse and leave that masonry wall.
Not take a lot with it. Yeah.
We saw this a year ago with the Notre Dame fire. That's one of the reasons that building is still standing, because a lot of the roof and attic structure burned away, but it left the main, and that was built in the 1400s. That masonry work is still there. So,
Because they had done, the vaulting was all stone,
Correct.
so that really helped save it. The roof was protecting the stone more than anything else. So here's your latest kit of parts, and we took engine 4 and replaced it with engine 4.
correct. Engine 4 was an engine that we were borrowing for a number of years from the town of Bridgewater. It was an old Maxim truck. We desperately needed a spare truck at the time. I think Rockland had used that a couple of times, as well as our engine 1. You know, we share
This one got around.
equipment as needed. It was a versatile truck. It was kind of a Jeep. It was built around 1982. It was refurbished, years later, but it was functional, and it doesn't have a lot of the safety capabilities required today, but it was functional. So when we replaced our new engine, we kept the number engine 4 because we still have engine 1, 2, and 3. Every engine kind of goes down a step. We downgrade it one bit because we still use them. And it tries to alleviate the wear and tear and mileage on it. And we maintain some spares. So the new engine 4, this is a very unique engine for Abington. It's the same manufacturer as the Tower truck. It's Ferrara, that was built down in Louisiana, also custom. This truck almost looks European, whereby if you look at the truck, everything's enclosed on it. I had to get used to that, to be honest with you, because I'm not a huge fan of European trucks. It works for them. I'm used to seeing the pump panel and everything. However, pump panels ice up in New England. When we drive and operate in blizzards, everything in the truck is covered.
Is this from 4?
This is engine 4.
Okay, there's a bunch of, I've got 3 or 4 of these pictures of these panels open.
Yep, I'll show. Can you go back one, would you mind?
To the main?
Yep, there you go. So the pump panel is in a roll-down door. Everything's enclosed. It is in there.
Right
This
here?
carries, yep, it's behind there. There is a pump panel there. It's a full pumper.
I have a picture of it.
Okay. We
It's
carry
up with you.
750 gallons of water in this truck. We carry 30 gallons of foam. We carry, there's one whole compartment up above with a hopper that we carry speedy dry with, because anytime if there's a motor vehicle
spill,
accident,
yeah.
there's an oil spill, we want to soak that up. This has its own compartment with that. This truck is designed to be a massive rolling toolbox, in addition to the normal duties that a rescue pumper needs, which is the water, the hose, the pump. This has, there is a recessed gun up there, another 1,000 gallon per minute gun. This is a 1,500 gallon per minute truck, not a 2,000. Once we feed it, the other side has the other pump panel where the hoses can go into it. Everything's enclosed on this, which we had to get used to. This is a large truck. It's tall. There's actually a ladder built into the back of this to get to we call it the second floor, because it's all compartment space above where that says Abington. Those are large compartments above where we can store things that we have to carry, but we don't normally access every day. So we're kind of able to put them out of the area. That makes this truck also very tall. We did everything we could to shorten this truck.
So you're saying you have an attic?
Kind of. There's a second floor to it. There
Where
really
you put
is.
stuff that you don't often use. It's an attic.
This has about 700 cubic feet of storage space. A typical engine's about 350, maybe 4. So massive amount of storage on this, because we're carrying more equipment because we're doing more things. We're carrying ballistic armor now, which we never thought we'd have to be doing that role. We carry a lot of unique rescue equipment. As cars change and the construction of the material of current motor vehicles change, we have to have the tools to cut that, to rescue them. So these are just some of the compartments on here. They're fairly large. It's a very strong truck. This is just a small emergency generator. This is a battery-operated ventilation fan where we can, if there was smoke in this building, it used to be you'd put a fan in the window and you'd suck the smoke out. We've been doing for about the last 25 years, we call it positive pressure ventilation, which means we're going to pressurize this building with air and open one window. And it's like inflating a balloon and putting a small hole in it without it popping, and all that stuff's going to blow out. So we'll put a fan at the front door, pressurize this entire building, and then open a window somewhere, and all the smoke's going to, you can literally walk behind it as it goes out. That's called a PPV fan. That's what that is.
And they did it at my Abington house when my furnace motor decided to self-destruct on the coldest day of the year. And all of the heat in the house just got sucked right out at like 10 o'clock at night. And it was a little uncomfortable. It was effective, but it was a little uncomfortable. But yes.
You can see, we have different rescue saws. The one on the left is for for cutting holes in the roof. The reason we cut holes in a roof in a fire, it's not because firefighters just like to break things.
Yes, it is.
We want to let the heat and the smoke out at the highest point if we can, so that we can come in afterwards and find the fire and extinguish it. If we don't let that heat out, when we start hitting the fire, the entire place fills with steam and we actually get burnt. So the reason we try to cut holes in the roof, the fire wants to go up and out. If we can cut a hole in the roof, the fire is going to do that, and that can also stop the spread of the fire throughout, especially in one of those balloon frame construction homes that we're very familiar with. We want to get the fire out.
Oops, wrong way, sorry.
This is the pump panel. The door is rolled up. It's a full, modern pump.
Does it talk to you? It looks like it should.
It doesn't. No,
Okay.
There's a lot more electronics than I'm used to, but the newer firefighters coming in, they're very good with this. They know how to operate it very well. And every inch of this truck, we're carrying different things. There's a portion of the pump panel up top with that rack system up there. We're carrying long backboards in there because otherwise it's kind of wasted space.
Where do they go? Yeah.
It crosses through the entire truck. It's a very versatile truck.
I have one more panel one. Oh no,
These
two
are
more. That's Jaws
these
of
are
Life.
our new Jaws of Life. They're
Right.
battery operated now.
Oh wow.
We've actually gone to battery operated cordless Jaws of Life, and believe it or not, these are stronger than the older hydraulic ones with the hydraulic motor pump. I had a hard time believing this until I saw it, because we're used to the old. We had. The jaws used to be connected by a reel to the truck, and that could be portable, where we have our little gasoline-operated hydraulic pump that would make these work. This is being run by a small cordless drill battery, and it's actually stronger than the older ones. It's incredible technology.
It's all how it's
One
geared.
man or
isn't it?
two man?
It depends. We still try to do one.
Still try
Person
to have
can do
two
it, but
on
we try to
the,
have two.
Jaws
Yeah.
on the spreaders. But you can do the cutters. You can operate with one pretty easily, and you can carry one in each hand very easily.
It's the first
They're
time
much
I've
lighter.
seen one.
They're incredible. And the reason you still need two is because as powerful as whether this is a Jaws used to spread open, it's a combination. There's also a cutter, but we also have a designated cutter, a dedicated cutter, and the blades are curved. So as it's cutting in like along one of the posts of a car, it kind of pulls itself in. As strong as these are, there is an incredible amount of kinetic energy that is stored on this until that final cut goes. And if we're using it, and if one person's using it, and you're just pushing the button and you're holding it, and the machine's doing all the work, at one point that energy is going to release, and this can throw you. It's amazing to see the amount of energy.
When the frame that it's trying to pull apart finally gives?
Correct.
Okay.
Because the materials that these frames are being made out of now, it's incredibly strong steel. And once that finally snaps, all that energy is kind of being released, and we have to control that.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to have two people on that tool, just to, you can go flying with that otherwise.
Yeah.
What voltage does that run
I think it's like 9 or 12 volt. It's like a DeWalt cordless drill
I think they're
battery.
24 volt.
Is it 24?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
because 18 is what a lot of people,
Okay.
I think, is the the size for the DeWalt's for the
Right.
construction sites, or whatever. So
they're getting more into the
stronger.
24 range.
24.
I'm a Makita man, but that's my work.
Well, that explains a lot. Now, this one I had no idea what I was looking at.
This is a complete custom-made compartment. All of this equipment we just got on a grant, as well as all of the rescue equipment. We got a grant at the same time this truck was being built.
As a taxpayer in Abington, I thank you.
It was an $84,000 grant on rescue equipment, and it came at the perfect time with the truck, so we designed the truck for the equipment coming from this grant. This is all, it's a combination of things. They're airbags. These are small
To lift.
lifting airbags. And we're talking heavy lift. We could technically lift one of the MBTA cars on this. I hope we never have to. And they're pneumatic. They're flat. It's like a flat, heavy rubber pillow. We attach an air line into it that goes into it uses the same bottle as our air tanks that we breathe from.
Oh, okay.
So, we get to reuse that material that we have. And we have a control with it, and we're putting, however many pounds per square inch, PSI, that goes in here. This is lifting many tons of equipment, and we can pile these on top of each other. And then when we get it lifted, the next step is to take large plastic, heavy plastic blocks, and we build up cribbing around it so that it's not just the airbags lifting it, we're building it up with material,
Something solid.
cribbing.
Yeah.
We use a special plastic mainly because the wood soaks up chemicals, a lot of it's biohazard. After an accident, it's cleaner. We can wash the plastic off, whereas the wood, we used to have wood ones,
Right.
pressure-treated wood, that was absorbing things. That's the main reason for that. These are cleaner. So this entire compartment is a lot of that kit, that heavy lift kit and the cribbing. We use these on motor vehicle accidents if we have to lift the vehicle.
The compressor's right there too, right?
Nope, it's not a compressor. We use the air bottles. There's no compressor in the truck. We just use the Scott air bottles.
Wow.
There's no compressor on this.
I didn't realize that.
Yep. The box that's in there, it's a glorified piece of luggage, basically. It's almost like a suitcase. That's the controller for these. We have a hose that goes to the air bottles. We have a controller, and then the other lines that go to these bags. That's how we control it. It's all held in there. Incredible technology that we have on this.
I have one more slide, I think, that's going to deal with homeowner concerns when it comes to fire protection and firefighting. But before we get into that, there are other technologies that aren't represented here.
Excellent.
Communications certainly have changed so much. I've been noticing, I love the story that with the Rockland fire, the fire notification back then was a bell, guess where it was? In the steeple. So it basically rang its own death knell as the steeple was coming down. It was notifying everyone of the fire. I grew up with fire horns, just Station 1 right at the foot of my street, and it went off every day at 12:15, but it had other sequences, and you could count the number of beeps or horn sounds and know which box it was responding to. We're not doing that anymore, and I noticed the boxes are being removed. So I know we went to pagers, and I know we went to cell phones and radios. What's the state of the art today to stay in touch? So I know at the same time you also have more full-time people.
Yep.
Back then it was notifying part-time call firemen to, hey, get over there. But that's less of that now. So how do you guys communicate?
I'm glad you brought this up, and I'm glad Rockland's here, because I'm going to give somebody credit that really deserves it. There's multiple parts to this, and I'm going to hit them all quickly if I can. First of all, the fire alarm system. Abington has removed our old wired telegraphic fire alarm system. These are the boxes you'd see in the telephone poles. A lot of buildings had these attached to them. They were literally all connected with a wire. It was a bare steel wire, literally. It was like a coat hanger wire because it was old. And there was a small current that would always go through that. When you would pull one of those hooks, or if it was automatic, if you had one in this building and the fire alarm goes off, it would automatically pull that hook. It would be, there's a small geared wheel in each one of those boxes, and each one has a number. It would be like box 1234 or 6713, whatever it is. We would know we're receiving box 6713. We know at the time that used to be 585 Chestnut Street. We have no idea what's going on there. We just know we have received the box for 585 Chestnut Street.
Get your butt over there.
We have knowing, and each box may be different, so we may respond to one location differently than we'll just respond to the street box.
Because of where it is.
Correct, or what the building is. So, we would go by whatever the response for that building is. All of those that have been removed, now they're on, mainly they went to like a private monitoring company, like an ADT.
We have
or they've
one
just
here.
been removed from the town, from the telephone poles, because it's the cost benefit. We really weren't getting many calls on those. Everybody's got a cell phone now,
Right.
and that we're doing that. So half of our fire alarm system's gone. Half of it remains. The portion that remains are radio boxes, and they're still around, and they're modern, and they send a radio signal to the fire station. That gives us a lot more information. It breaks it down into zones. So the new high school, for instance, there's 3 of these boxes. We broke that large building into 3 portions, and if depending on the zone, we'll know we're getting the sprinkler flow from the gym area at the new high school. We already know kind of at least what we're getting, and if we get subsequent alarms, that could spell maybe something's progressing there. Maybe we have a fire, or maybe not. Maybe if we get a sprinkler flow, now we're getting a heat detector, now we're getting another one from another area, that's going to tell us, that's telling us there's something going on
Right.
there, as opposed to one. So that technology remains. We have opted to try not to build out that system too much because it's still expensive. And I think probably in about 10 years, at some point that system's going to be taken down too, but not yet. There's still a lot invested in that. But as that equipment becomes older and it's going to get more expensive, at some point I think we're going to take that down too, but we've still got a number of years. The communications, the state of the art really is our cell phones, to be honest with you. When we're working and on duty, we all have radios, and I'll talk to that in a moment. Our cell phones now can tell us, I usually get an email. Every time we go out, I get an email on it. I get another notification system. If I want to, I can plug into this and I have the radio talk. I can't talk back on it, but I can listen.
Okay.
There are some where you can talk. There is technology out there that you can actually use these to talk on the radio. Our radio system is phenomenal. And I want to give credit to one of the Rockland firefighters in the back of the room, Rockland firefighter Mark Oshry, who was instrumental
Thank you, Mark.
in writing. Oh, you haven't thanked him yet, but you're all going to thank him.
He saved me money? Is that what you're going to tell me?
Mark was instrumental in writing a FEMA grant around 2012,
He did save me money.
2013, to completely update both the Abington and the Rockland radio system. And we did it together. We did it as a joint venture, for a number of reasons. First of all, Rockland had issues, Abington had issues. If we tie our systems together, it's a larger network, so we basically created a network. Mark's successful FEMA grant was able to completely replace the entire infrastructure of the radio equipment for both towns, which included the portable radios that each firefighter has, the mobile radios, which are in all of the fire apparatus for both towns, the main base radios that we operate from the fire stations as well, and they're in a couple of different large antenna repeater sites in the area. That's about a $750,000 grant that Mark was successful in getting for the 2 towns, which saved all of you in Abington about $350,000. Rockland had a little bit larger area that they had to build a few sites on. They had more equipment. So, Mark, again, I want to thank you for that. You really enjoyed it. We really do work well together. Chief Whiting was able to, through a capital request to the town of Abington, get 2 thermal imaging cameras for the fire department, 1 for each station in our main responding engines. And they were extremely expensive back then. They're still expensive, but back then they were extremely expensive.
Really?
And that really changed our operations. And they were large. I don't have one with me, or I would have brought one. We actually traded it in for a newer model, to be honest with you. We're very tight now. We're
It's basically about the size of a shoebox with a handle on it.
it was,
Nice.
and the deputy's absolutely correct. And it had
That's
a
the new one.
screen on it.
No, that was
it was great.
yeah,
that was
the
the
first
original.
Oh, the original?
They were the originals.
So
And
that's smart.
these were about $20,000. These
Wow.
were extremely expensive, but they saved lives. The second and third generation of those, it was the same company. Now they just made them smaller. Now it kind of looked like a Palm camcorder that we all had back in the early 90s. And we thought that was big. Still smaller than the cable TV camera here, but about that size.
Okay, it's not range.
The newest ones we have, and I got these a year ago, now this is a thermal imaging camera.
Oh my
And
goodness.
every member of the department has one. So
they're,
we went.
they're affordable.
They've become much more affordable. The technology is incredible. The images are in color because the color tells you the different temperature.
Yeah.
And now every member has one.
Nice.
So when it's ironic, our trucks are getting larger, and some of our equipment's actually getting smaller, but we're trying to keep up with the technology.
Electronics versus mechanical. And
Yeah.
also, as you addressed, you're doing different tasks.
Correct.
Absolutely.
So-
I'd like to, because we have limited time today, we can talk all afternoon about this. I kind of want to bring this home to our audience in talking about what we all need to do in our own homes, in our own places of business, in our own surroundings to help us deal with the potential for fire and life safety issues. And I mean, there's some that I think we all know about. I'm showing up here a smoke detector, of which I'm going to show a little bit of my ignorance of basically two types, one that detects smoke and one for ionization. In the middle is a carbon monoxide detector, and on my side is a sprinkler head. I think I might have one of the few single-family residences in town that actually has sprinklers in it. I've only got two, but one over the staircase and one over the furnace, just because I've had an awareness of how easy it is to do that and how much safer it makes my house. I've done it now in two of my homes, and I think it's the right thing to do. So, I mean, we deal with silent killers. We deal with just alerting you that there's an emergency situation that sometimes you might not know about. I remember when I did have the furnace blower motor decide to die. All my smoke detectors were going off. Everything was going off. I didn't see any fire. I didn't see any smoke. I could smell something. But we had difficulty finding it. Didn't matter. The detector knew it was there. So I knew enough to get the hell out of the house and call them. But
the detectors give you early notification.
Absolutely.
Anything that goes on.
No matter
Since
what. And
1975, they've been required in.
Now,
all
initially they were
single-family
battery powered, which was a problem with the batteries died, but now they're, I think, required, at least in new construction, to be hardwired with battery
homes.
backup.
Hardwired with battery backup.
Okay. And they're required in more places. It used to be like one per floor at the head of the stairs,
Correct.
and now they're in all bedrooms?
Each bedroom. One in
Each
each bedroom, one outside the sleeping area,
Okay.
one at the base of any stairs going up to another level.
Okay. And in carbon monoxide detectors, is that one per floor? Is that how that's
Yeah,
working?
and within 10 feet of any bedroom door.
Okay.
So if you have a bedroom at either end of the house,
Right.
and you're more than 20 feet apart, you're going to need a couple.
You're going to need a couple. Now, I had played with and shied away from the combined units, the combined smoke detector and CO2 units, CO units. Finding, first of all, they failed a lot, but isn't it also that you tend to want to detect products of combustion high and then carbon monoxide low?
Well, actually, the specific gravity of carbon monoxide is just very close to air in
Okay.
itself.
So it could be anywhere.
Basically, through just normal air currents in a house, it's going to disperse uniformly anyways.
Okay.
So it doesn't need to be down near the floor. So that's why, but most new construction, they use the combination smoke and CO.
I've had more trouble with those, so that's why I just...
They're getting a little better now.
Good, because I finally just
Plus,
one of the houses
yeah.
said okay, smokes, carbon, two
Plus
separate
around
things.
here, if they're a combination, especially, they need to have voice differentiation.
Okay,
So,
as to which
you
it's
have a
notifying
voice saying,
you for.
because not everybody remembers 3 beeps is smoke and 4 beeps is fire.
There is a fire. There's a great story on Martha's Vineyard that one of the Adams sisters, they were part of the P.T. Barnum circuses. They were midgets, and one of them had a home in the historic Camp Meeting Association, and she taught diction and manners and everything, and the house next door was on fire, and she came out to her front balcony and announced, "There is a conflagration." Like, everyone else would just yell fire. But she had to add the drama to it. But anyway, another early warning system, your neighbor. And we talked the other day, Ron, about the prevalence now and maybe soon requirement for sprinklers, something I did
Yes.
25 years
That's
ago.
actually, that's a residential sprinkler head there.
Has the
that
red
response. Has
Yeah,
the-
yeah.
Most buildings now above a certain square footage need to be sprinkled, or above a certain number of residential units. Right? In Massachusetts, it's 4 and up for new construction. I'm a big advocate for putting sprinklers in everywhere, but it costs extra money, and it seems contractors don't want to add the extra money to their houses. But
Do we also have the issue of having enough water pressure to run them?
well, not actually for single-family homes. It can run off it runs off
Regular line?
the regular water line that comes in the house. They're designed to slow the fire so you have more time to get out. Because with today's construction and today's furnishing, so even if you're in an older house, but you got you got your TVs, you got your new furniture, everything burns much faster now. Back in the late 70s when the smoke detectors first came out, your smoke detector went off, and you had the older furniture, you probably had anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes or even longer to get out from the time your smoke detector went off till the time you had maybe a flashover, with the heat got so much. These days now, with the way the houses are constructed and with the high plastics levels and the furnishings, your smoke detector goes off, you might have 90 seconds to get out.
So the instruction is that detector goes off, you got the hell out.
And in the middle of the night, it's going to take you 30 seconds just to figure out what's going on to begin with.
Yeah,
so
really.
you're lucky to have a minute to get out. So with with sprinklers, we're still trying to push, in this state to get them in single-family homes. Some states do. I think about 10 to 12 states have it in their building code where all structures have sprinklers. It'll give you time to get out, and most of the time it'll end up putting the fire out anyways. But
Depending upon the magnitude.
depending on the magnitude of it, because even in large buildings, factory buildings, if a sprinkler goes off, fire starts, and a sprinkler goes off, you might have one or two actually go off, and it's not like in the movies, only one goes off at a time. It's not like they all go off at once when you pull the fire alarm.
It depends upon a wet or dry system. Anyway, so we brought this back to a personal level, so I'm going to ask if we have any questions for our experts while they're here. Or we have some Rockland experts in the back as well who could maybe answer questions if appropriate. So I'm going to kind of open it up to the audience. And Bill Tenney, you have a question.
Some will remember the 1998 fire at the Old South Union Church in Weymouth.
Yes.
Across from the
Cameo.
Cameo. Balloon frame construction.
Yeah.
Being renovated, being painted, using a heat gun
Here we go again.
that set off the cords holding the window weights.
Mm-hmm.
And they heard them drop. And that's when they fled.
They were lead, so yeah, they did hear them drop.
Is there anything that can be done to historic buildings? You have 3 old churches here in Abington that I'm aware of, to change the balloon frame construction.
One can always retrofit, but one has to open up the walls to do it. I find in cases like that, the first step is just early notification, to get at. Once they show up, they can knock holes in walls and do whatever they need to do to get at the sources. But
But again, this was only a few years ago.
Right. I haven't seen anyone retrofit fire blocking into historic buildings without opening up the walls. I mean, if you're doing a major renovation, open up the walls anyway, sure.
You blow rock wool?
It melts. It melts. It really does. It offers very little. And I'm terribly afraid of the foams that we're injecting in all the walls now. I think I'm afraid of them on a couple of different levels. I'm not quite sure where the vapor barriers are, and I'm afraid they're going to rot the studs because the moisture's got to go somewhere. And yeah, in terms of what happens with off-gassing and everything else when the walls are full of foam, and certainly they insulate and hold heat in. I always heard that argument with aluminum siding, that you don't want a house fire with aluminum siding because it holds the heat in.
It's an oven.
But every time we do, advances in technology, for every plus there's a minus, and it's a real problem. So, but I mean, answering your problem without doing major renovations to introduce fire blocking, I'm not aware of anything that can do it. And your best bet is usually early notification. Is that, you think, a reasonable answer?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to protect a building, especially older ones, is to add a sprinkler system.
Right.
It's quite expensive.
And not use torches inside.
Adding one to a large building is quite expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Putting one into a brand new residential home really doesn't add much to the cost.
But yet, you say that, but I mean, he's talking about church buildings who typically have wide open attics. So, I mean, there's a place up there already to run piping.
Yeah.
A dry system, but there's something.
Yeah.
So it can be done, but...
I'm looking to see if we have them here.
We do not. we do have detection systems, and we are tied into a central monitoring place. So
In St. Petersburg and Provincetown, it was in the winter that they'd actually cleared the parking lots and built a wall of snow behind the church, so the fire apparatus couldn't get close.
couldn't get close enough to the building.
They were working on trying to get streets plowed. It was
Yeah.
after there was snow up to my head in some of the side streets,
Yeah.
and I'd gone out there to check my property, but the fire started in the furnace and went immediately through
All the way out.
balloon frame up
Yeah.
into the attic.
It's
And
the
then
problem with the balloon.
it was so fast.
It made sense in the day. It just, we look at it now and said, what were they thinking? But anyway, yes.
One thing you want to remember on balloon situation is that going up, the fire traveling up that way, and it travels mainly because of cobwebs. Cobwebs can actually jump that fire faster than anything, and there's a lot of spider and cobwebs. And then you take the old homes too, where it's going up like that, the horsehair plaster. So you had the cobwebs and you had the horsehair plaster at the same time going up. But cobwebs, you can actually take a bunch of cobwebs and put them in a coffee can, and then close the cover on it and light it from the bottom, and that cover will go flying in the air.
A lot of this is just us being familiar with the buildings in our jurisdictions too,
Yes.
up in New England, because certainly balloon frame construction in the age of the buildings make a difference. When you get into the horsehair plaster, which usually is plaster and wood lath construction, that lath,
The wood.
is always dry. That takes off quickly. The cobwebs or anything, a lot of times rodents get in there, squirrels,
Sure.
mice, birds' nests. We've had fires here where there shouldn't have been a fire. Somebody dropped a cigarette out the window of the second floor, and it fell in, and there was a bird nest in there. And that's actually what got the building going. That's not uncommon. Or squirrel nests like that, and they're always dry. They're usually fairly old. There's material, there's fuel, is what it comes down to. There's combustible fuel in void spaces.
Mm-hmm.
The cobwebs can be a good indication as well, because if we start opening up a ceiling or a wall, and if there's cobwebs, and they may be black or whatever, that means the fire hasn't got there, because they would have burned away. So, okay, this one's clean, even though it looks like smoke, there's been times we've seen that. But even beyond the balloon frame, any type of construction, we've had serious fires in non-combustible buildings within the last couple of years. There was a fatality where the building didn't go whatsoever. It never got past it, but all the contents of the room did.
Mm-hmm.
You can build anything that's fireproof. You can make a concrete building, and we literally have them. But when we start putting our furnishings in, and like the deputy said, they burn quickly. And it's the contents of that room that is still going to burn. A lot of times, when we're pulling up, we're looking at the smoke, and there's actually terms called reading smoke, and we can look at the color of the smoke, we can look at the velocity of the smoke. Is it pushing quickly? Is it just kind of lazily seeping out? And depending on just what the color of that smoke is, that can tell us if it's the contents, if it's the structure, if it's the roof deck's going, if it is not getting enough oxygen, just by reading that smoke. If it's like a gray smoke, that's usually the contents. If the smoke is brown, and now it's into the structure, if it's a wood frame building. If it's thick black smoke, now we've got the asphalt going. If it's like a weird yellow-green smoke, usually that means that it's ready for a backdraft, and it's not getting enough oxygen. If it's weird-colored smokes, like we saw at a fire in Rockland a few years ago, because they had a large old mill going, and you saved an entire neighborhood on that, God knows what it is. It's a hazardous material. And it could be a refrigerant. And that was common. You get refrigerant lines that burn, and they can be purple and all the colors of the rainbow. Usually we know enough. We have no idea what it is, but we're going to stay away.
So how do you know if it's they elected the Pope or not?
It's either white or black, I think.
See, you're supposed to know. I think we might have time for one more question. We've been talking for some time, and I don't want to keep you too long. Yes, Ms. Counter.
you were talking about, you know, your job has changed, you know, your wet rescue squad is probably, you probably get more calls for that than you do for fires, I would imagine. Are all the firefighters in, you know, in the area required to be paramedics as well?
Excellent question. I'm glad you brought that up. I am one of only 2 firefighters in the Abington Fire Department that's not a paramedic. Myself.
I'm not the other one.
I'm
the paramedic.
He is a paramedic.
I know Ron because he started.
Yes, he is.
I'm a nurse, and I said to him, "How did you learn to do that?"
We have incredibly talented people. And, you know, a lot of them, you know, since we've hired them, they've moved into the town, they're raising families here. It's imperative you hold on to your employees. It's great.
Oh, God.
We've got, you know, because they're vested in it. And, you know, they start to know the histories of the building, especially in the fire service, because every building's different. The sprinkler systems, the fire protection systems are different. We don't want to lose that experience. On the medical end, the same thing. That, like any medical profession, I'm totally switching hats now and putting on, you know, the medical side of what we do. Everybody starts out somewhere, and you know, whether, you know, you're a new EMT, a new paramedic, and you're trained, you're certified, you're good. But after years of experience, you just start to learn more. You read the EKGs differently. You look at the vital signs, the symptoms, just how the patient presents differently. That takes experience.
You get to know several patients.
We get
also.
to know the patients and their history. He's absolutely correct.
For better, for worse.
You know, there's patients in town that we're familiar with their history. We have some very unique illnesses and conditions with people, and we know them, you know, which is a huge benefit to our residents.
Oh, God.
So we're very fortunate. We have incredibly talented paramedics in this department, and incredible equipment that we carry. We're carrying things that were literally science fiction years ago, even when I started.
They still are.
And, you know, we've literally brought the emergency room, almost the operating room, not quite, but we're getting close, into your living room. And we're beginning that care immediately while we're transporting to the appropriate facility, because not all hospitals are the same. We're very fortunate. Every hospital around us is extremely good. But sometimes we may bypass them for a number of reasons. Usually it's a staffing issue, and we're going to go right into Boston, whether it's by land or by air.
Yeah.
Depending on the issue. Because we know, and again, those employees know, okay, the cath lab is down in this hospital today for whatever reason. This hospital over here, even though they may be a trauma center, they may not have quite the full staff as a level 1 trauma center, which is in Boston. It's going to be worth taking that route. That's just us knowing what we have, because ultimately the goal is the patient care, and we want to see the patient recover, you know, survive and recover. That's all part of it. So, excellent question. Thank you.
It is. And we're going to end with that question. However, I'm going to ask these guys to stick around if they can for a bit. In the back room now we have refreshments set up, just light refreshments, but we encourage you to stay and talk and ask questions and look around. On the lower floor of this building, we don't normally invite the public there, but down at the end of the corridor there are other fire item displays, as well as the display in the Sam Dyer room just across the hall here, culling some of our collection, and that will stay up for a while, maybe till our next lecture, maybe beyond. Anyway, and an exercise I always do before I send everyone off is to a show of hands. How many are members of the Historical Society of Old Abington? Look around you and see who didn't raise their hands and say hi to them. And I thank you all for your attention today and for joining us. Thank you. It was fascinating. We all have a better understanding and appreciation. I thank the professionals from Rockland for being here as well. You were remarkably well behaved. Thank you. And stick around and ask questions. Thank you. I've been a great audience.
Doug, thank you.
And in freedom we live, our purses are ready. Steady, friends, steady, not as slaves, but as free.